They broke her bone by bone, word by word, until nothing remained but a hollow shell. To the Blackwood pack, Ivy Foster wasn't just an Omega. She was a mistake, a fragile thing to be used, mocked, and discarded. Everyone expected her to die alone in the snow during the winter solstice gathering. They had their bets placed on how long she would last. But they forgot one thing. Broken glass cuts the deepest. And when the most feared alpha on the continent walked through those doors, he didn't come for power, he came for the one thing nobody else wanted. The cold in the attic room wasn't just a temperature, it was a physical weight, pressing down on Ivy Foster's chest until every breath rattled. She sat on the edge of the bare mattress, her fingers trembling as she pulled the thin, moth-eaten wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. Downstairs, the noise was deafening. The floorboards vibrated with the heavy thud of boots, the clinking of expensive crystal, and the raucous laughter of the Blackwood pack. Tonight was the winter solstice, the most important night of the year. It was the night wolves found their mates, alliances were forged, and the hierarchy was cemented in blood and wine. For everyone else, it was a celebration. For Ivy, it was just another Tuesday of terror, only louder. "Ivy!" The screech came from the bottom of the stairs, piercing through the floor. It was Jessica, the Beta's daughter. Jessica had a voice like grinding gears and a heart to match. Ivy didn't answer. She knew better than to make a sound, unless directly commanded. She stood up, her legs stiff from the cold. She caught a reflection in the cracked mirror leaning against the wall. A pale, gaunt face stared back. Her hazel eyes were dull, sunken into dark hollows that spoke of sleepless nights. She wore a faded grey dress that hung off her frame like a shroud. It had been her mother's, before the accident that took both her parents and left Ivy as the pack's punching bag. At 22, she was an anomaly, an unpresented wolf, an Omega who couldn't shift, couldn't heal fast, and couldn't fight back. In the ruthless hierarchy of the shifters, she was less than dirt. She was a burden. The door to the attic slammed open. Ivy flinched, instinctively backing into the corner. Jessica stood there, resplendent in a red silk gown that cost more than Ivy had ever seen in her life. She looked beautiful, in the way a poisonous flower looks beautiful. Behind her stood Colton, the pack's current alpha. He was handsome, broad-shouldered, and had a smile that didn't reach his predatory eyes. "Why aren't you downstairs, Omega?" Colton asked, his voice smooth but dangerous. "We have guests. The alpha of the Iron River pack is here. We need someone to serve the wine." I wasn't told to come down, Alpha," Ivy whispered, keeping her eyes on the floor. Eye contact was viewed as a challenge. Challenges were met with violence. "Well, you're being told now," Jessica sneered, stepping forward to run a manicured nail down Ivy's arm. She dug it in until she drew a bead of blood. "And try not to look so pathetic. You're embarrassing us." Ivy swallowed the whimper rising in her throat. "Yes, Jessica." "Go," Colton barked. Ivy hurried past them, smelling the distinct mix of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of aggression rolling off them. As she descended the stairs, the heat of the house hit her, carrying the scent of roasted meat and heavy perfumes. The great hall was packed. Dozens of wolves from neighboring territories were mingling. She made her way to the kitchen, keeping her head down. The cook, a gruff woman named Martha, who was the only person who didn't actively hate Ivy, shoved a heavy silver tray into her hands. "Just keep moving, child," Martha muttered, looking around nervously to ensure no one was watching. "Don't stop, don't speak, and for God's sake, don't drop anything." Ivy nodded and pushed through the swinging doors into the ballroom. The noise was overwhelming. She moved like a ghost through the crowd, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Most people ignored her, taking glasses without a glance. Others, like the warriors from the northern border, deliberately bumped into her, snickering when wine sloshed over her hands. She was making a loop near the fireplace when the room suddenly went silent. The music cut off. The chatter died instantly. The heavy oak doors at the main entrance swung open with a groan that echoed through the hall. The winter wind howled in, carrying snowflakes and a scent that made every wolf in the room stiffen. It was the smell of ozone, pine, and absolute, crushing power. A man stepped into the light. He was massive, easily 6'4", wearing a tailored black suit that strained against the muscle beneath. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a perpetual look of dangerous skepticism. Silas Sterling, the alpha of the Obsidian Shadow Pack. The whispers started immediately. "What is he doing here?" I thought the Obsidian Pack didn't leave their territory. "He's the one who wiped out the rogue army in the south, single-handedly." Colton stepped forward, his posture stiff. He was trying to look dominant, but compared to Silas, he looked like a boy playing dress-up. "Alpha Sterling," Colton said, forcing a smile. "We didn't expect you." Silas didn't smile. He didn't even look at Colton. His eyes, a startling icy blue, were scanning the room. He was hunting. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Colton," Silas said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Ivy's chest, causing her tray to rattle slightly. "I'm here to collect a debt." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Ivy froze in the shadows of a large potted fern, clutching her tray so hard her knuckles turned white. She knew about the debt. Everyone did. Years ago, before Colton's father died, the Blackwood Pack had borrowed heavily from the Obsidian reserves during a famine. They had never paid it back. Colton laughed nervously. "A debt? Surely we can discuss this in my office. Over a drink?" "No," Silas said. He took a step forward, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. The terms of the loan were clear. If not paid in gold by the winter solstice of this year, the debt would be paid in assets. Jessica scoffed from beside Colton. "Assets? What do you want? Land? Weapons?" Silas ignored her. He continued his slow, predatory walk through the room. He walked past the high-ranking female wolves who were preening, arching their backs and flashing their necks, hoping to catch the eye of the most powerful bachelor in the region. He walked past the warriors who dropped their gazes in submission. He stopped in the center of the room. His nose flared slightly. He turned his head, his gaze locking onto the corner where Ivy was hiding. Ivy's heart stopped. "Don't look at me," she pleaded silently. "Please, just look away." But he didn't. He started walking toward her. The crowd murmured in confusion. Why was the Alpha King walking toward the help? Colton frowned. "Alpha Sterling. That is just the Omega, the runt. She serves the drinks. If you are thirsty, I can have a fresh bottle of—" "Silence!" Silas commanded, not raising his voice, but the authority in it snapped Colton's mouth shut. Silas stopped 3 feet from Ivy. Up close, he was terrifying. The sheer heat radiating off him was intoxicating. Ivy felt a strange pull in her gut, a warmth she had never experienced before. Her wolf, usually dormant and silent, stirred within her. He looked her up and down, taking in the frayed dress, the bruises on her arms that she had tried to cover with powder, and the fear in her eyes. "What is your name?" he asked. Ivy's voice failed her. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "She doesn't have a name worth speaking," Jessica interjected, stepping up to Silas's side, trying to reclaim the attention. "She's Ivy. She's broken. She can't even shift. She's practically human. Silas slowly turned his head to look at Jessica. The look was one of pure disgust. "I didn't ask you." He turned back to Ivy. He reached out a hand. The entire room gasped. "Ivy!" He repeated the name, tasting it. "Put the tray down." I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Alpha Colton will punish me if I stop working." Silas's jaw tightened. A flash of gold flickered in his blue eyes. He reached out and gently took the heavy silver tray from her shaking hands. He held it for a second, then let it drop. Clang! The sound of shattering crystal and silver hitting the hardwood floor echoed like a gunshot. Champagne sprayed over Ivy's shoes and Silas's polished boots. No one moved. "The debt is settled," Silas announced, his voice booming through the silent hall. He looked at Colton. "I am taking the girl." Colton blinked, stunned. Then he laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "You want her? As payment for millions in gold? Sterling, she's defective. She's a broken toy. Take Jessica. Take my sister. Take anyone of value." "Value is subjective," Silas said coldly, "and you have treated a gem like a stone." He stepped closer to Ivy, invading her personal space. He lowered his head, his nose brushing against the pulse point of her neck. Ivy gasped, a jolt of electricity shooting down her spine. The scent of him, rainstorms and pine, enveloped her, making her knees weak. "Mine!" he growled, low enough that only she and the nearest wolves could hear. Then he did the unthinkable. He didn't just claim her, he marked his territory. He shrugged off his heavy suit jacket. It was warm and smelled like safety. He draped it over Ivy's shoulders, engulfing her small frame. The jacket hung to her knees, hiding her ragged dress and the bruises. "Button it," he ordered gently. Ivy's fingers fumbled with the buttons, her mind racing. Was this a trick? Was he going to take her to his pack to torture her, or use her as bait? "Alpha Sterling," Colton stepped forward, his face red with anger now. The insult of Silas choosing the runt over his own best warriors was too much. "You cannot just walk in here and take a member of my pack without a challenge, even for a debt. It's against tradition." Silas turned slowly. The air in the room grew heavy, the pressure dropping as his aura expanded. "You want to challenge me, Colton? For her? You just called her worthless." "She is my property," Colton spat. "If you want her, you fight for her." It was a suicide move. Everyone knew it. Colton was strong, but Silas was a legend. Silas smirked, but it was a cruel, dark expression. He began to unbutton his cuffs, rolling up his white dress shirt to reveal forearms corded with muscle and ancient runic tattoos. "Very well," Silas said, his eyes never leaving Colton's. "But let's make it interesting. I don't just want the girl. If I win, I want her freedom. I want her lineage records. And I want the Blackwood Pack to kneel." Colton hesitated. The stakes were impossibly high, but the eyes of the entire region were on him. He couldn't back down now. "Agreed," Colton snarled. He began to strip off his shirt, his body shifting, bones cracking as he prepared to turn into his wolf form. Silas didn't shift. He simply stood there, human, watching the brown wolf emerge from Colton's skin. Ivy wanted to scream, to tell him to run, to shift, to do something. A human couldn't fight a shifted alpha. Colton, now a massive wolf, lunged, jaws snapping for Silas's throat. Silas moved faster than sight. He sidestepped the lunge, grabbed the wolf by the scruff of its neck and the flank, and with a roar of effort, slammed the massive beast into the floor. The impact cracked the floorboards. Before Colton could recover, Silas had his knee on the wolf's neck, pinning him. He leaned down, his human eyes glowing bright gold. "Yield!" Silas commanded. The wolf snarled, thrashing. Silas applied pressure. A sickening crunch echoed, not a break, but a warning. I said, "Yield, or I will tear your throat out right here in front of your guests." Colton whined. It was a high, pathetic sound. He went limp, baring his neck in submission. Silas stood up, brushing imaginary dust off his shirt. He looked at the silent room. "The girl comes with me. Now." He turned back to Ivy, offering his hand again. This time, she didn't look at Colton. She didn't look at Jessica. She looked at the hand, large, scarred, and steady. She reached out and placed her trembling fingers in his palm. His grip tightened, warm and possessive. "Let's go home, Ivy," he said. As he led her out of the hall, past the stunned faces of the people who had tormented her for years, Ivy realized something terrified her more than the abuse she was leaving behind. Why did the most powerful alpha in the world want a broken Omega? And what would happen when he realized she was even more broken than she looked? The inside of the SUV smelled like leather and cedar. It was a massive, armored beast of a vehicle, part tank and part luxury sedan. Ivy sat pressed against the passenger door, as far away from Silas as physically possible, without phasing through the metal. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was still wearing his suit jacket. It was heavy, and the warmth of his body lingered in the fabric, a constant reminder of the predator sitting next to her. Silas drove in silence. He didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on the winding mountain road that led away from the Blackwood territory. His grip on the steering wheel was relaxed, but his knuckles were white. He was angry. Ivy could smell it, a sharp, burning scent like ozone before a lightning strike. "I didn't steal anything," Ivy blurted out, her voice cracking. The silence had become too loud. "If you're taking me to the dungeons, I didn't steal the silver." Jessica lied. Silas didn't break. He didn't yell. He simply reached over and turned on the heater. "I know you didn't steal anything, Ivy," he said, his voice deep and calm, contrasting sharply with the terrifying aura he projected. "And there are no dungeons where we are going." "Then where are you taking me?" "Home," he said simply. "My home, which is now your home." Ivy looked down at her hands. They were raw and red from scrubbing floors in the freezing cold earlier that morning. "Why?" she whispered. "I'm a defect. I can't shift. I have no wolf. I'm useless to a pack like yours. Are you going to sell me?" The car swerved slightly. Silas corrected the wheel instantly, his jaw clenching tight enough to snap iron. He pulled the car over to the side of the deserted snowy road and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Ivy flinched, curling into a ball, expecting a blow. That was what happened when Colton stopped the car. That was what always happened. Silas turned in his seat. He unbuckled his seatbelt so he could face her fully. "Look at me." Ivy shook her head, staring at her knees. "Ivy," he said. It wasn't a command. It was a plea wrapped in granite. "Look at me." She slowly lifted her chin. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the grime on her cheeks. Silas reached out. Ivy flinched violently, squeezing her eyes shut. But the blow never came. Instead, she felt a large, warm thumb brush away a tear from her cheek. His skin was rough, calloused from battle, but his touch was feather-light. "I am not Colton," Silas said, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed rage. "And I am not the Blackwood pack. No one will ever hit you again. No one will ever sell you. You are not a commodity, Ivy. You are—" He stopped himself. He looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "I am what?" she whispered. "You are important," he finished. though it felt like he wanted to say something else. He pulled his hand back, gripping the steering wheel again. "You said you have no wolf, that you're broken." "I am," she confirmed shamefully. "I turned 18 4 years ago. I never shifted. My parents were strong wolves, but I'm just human. Or worse." Silas started the car again, the engine purring to life. He pulled back onto the road. "You aren't broken, Ivy. You've been suppressed. I could smell the wolfsbane in that house. It was in the polish you used on the floors. It was in the water they gave you. They've been poisoning you for years to keep you weak." Ivy gasped. "What? No!" "They wouldn't. Why would they waste poison on me?" "Because," Silas said, staring into the darkness ahead, "if you ever shifted, Colton knows you would be stronger than him. And a weak man fears nothing more than a powerful woman." The revelation hit Ivy like a physical blow. They hadn't just hated her. They had feared her? It seemed impossible. She looked at her skinny arms, the scars, the dirt. She felt nothing like a powerful wolf. She felt like a gust of wind could blow her away. They drove for another hour. The landscape changed. The scraggly dying forests of the Blackwood lands gave way to massive ancient redwoods. The snow here was white and pristine, not grey with soot. They approached a massive iron gate flanked by stone gargoyles. As the car drew near, the gates swung open automatically. "Welcome to Obsidian," Silas murmured. They drove up a winding driveway lined with lanterns. At the top of the hill stood a mansion that looked more like a modern fortress. It was all glass, steel, and dark stone, cantilevered over a cliff edge. It was breathtaking and intimidating. Silas parked in front of the massive double doors. Before Ivy could even reach for the handle, he was out of the car and opening her door. He offered his hand again. "Come," he said. Ivy stepped out. The air here was cleaner, sharper, but as her feet touched the gravel, she stumbled. The adrenaline of the evening had worn off, leaving her exhausted and dizzy from hunger. She started to fall. Silas caught her before she hit the ground. He didn't just steady her, he scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing more than a feather. "Put me down!" she panicked. "I can walk! I'm not supposed to be carried. The Alpha doesn't carry the help." "You aren't the help," Silas growled, kicking the front door open. "And you're done walking for today." He carried her into the grand foyer. It was warm, smelling of sandalwood and fire. A woman was waiting for them. She was tall, severe-looking, with greying hair pulled back into a tight bun. She wore a crisp black suit. "Alpha," the woman said, bowing her head. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the bundle of rags in his arms. "Is this—" "Yes, Mrs. Higgins," Silas said, not stopping. He walked towards the grand staircase. "Call Dr. Hayes. Tell him to meet me in the master suite immediately, and have the kitchen prepare soup. Nothing heavy. She's starving." "The master suite, sir?" Mrs. Higgins asked, her composure slipping for a fraction of a second. "Shall I prepare the guest wing instead, or the staff quarters?" Silas stopped on the first step. He turned his head, his eyes flashing that dangerous gold again. "I said the master suite, Mrs. Higgins. She stays with me." The master suite was larger than the entire attic Ivy had lived in for 10 years. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking a moonlit forest that stretched to the horizon. In the center of the room was a bed the size of a small island covered in black silk sheets. Silas set her down gently on the edge of the bed. Ivy immediately scrambled back, pulling her legs up to her chest. She looked around frantically. "I can't be here. This is wrong. You're the Alpha. I'm nobody." "Stop saying that," Silas said, taking off his jacket and tossing it onto a chair. Underneath, his white shirt was rumpled, the sleeve still rolled up. He looked tired, but his gaze on her was laser-focused. "You are Ivy, and until you realize what that means, I will do the thinking for you." A knock came at the door. A young man with glasses and a medical bag hurried in. He looked nervous. This was Dr. Hayes. "Alpha Sterling, you called?" Hayes asked, breathless. "Check her," Silas ordered, stepping back but not leaving the room. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the wall like a sentinel. Every inch. Bone density, blood work, scar tissue. I want to know exactly what they did to her. Dr. Hayes approached Ivy slowly, holding his hands up. "Hi, Ivy. I'm Dr. Hayes. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to take a look, okay?" Ivy nodded stiffly. She was used to doctors looking at her, usually after Jessica had gone too far, just to make sure she wouldn't die and cause a scene. But this was different. Dr. Hayes was gentle. As he began to examine her, peeling back the oversized jacket Silas had lent her, the room grew colder. "Fractured ulna, healed poorly," Dr. Hayes muttered, touching her arm. Ivy hissed in pain. "Ribs 4 and 5, previously broken, multiple times." He shone a light in her eyes. "Severe anemia, dehydration." He lifted the hem of her dress to check her legs. He stopped. Silas pushed off the wall. "What is it?" "The ankle," Hayes said quietly. "It was crushed. It looks like it was caught in a trap." "A bear trap," Ivy whispered, staring at the wall. "Jessica wanted to see if I would heal like a wolf, so she set a bear trap in the garden and told me to fetch her scarf." A low, guttural growl filled the room. It was a sound so deep it vibrated the glass windows. Ivy looked up in terror, thinking Silas was angry at her. But Silas wasn't looking at her. He was looking out the window, his hands clenched into fists so tight that blood was dripping from his palms where his nails had cut the skin. His eyes were fully gold, the beast near the surface. "Get out," Silas choked out. Dr. Hayes packed his bag instantly. "I'll leave some pain meds and supplements on the table. She needs rest, Alpha, and food, lots of it. Her body is eating itself to survive." The doctor fled the room. Ivy was shaking. She had made the Alpha angry. She started to slide off the bed. I'm sorry, I'll go to the cellar. Please don't be mad." Silas turned. In 2 strides he was in front of her. He dropped to his knees. For the second time that night, the most powerful man in the werewolf world was on his knees before the broken Omega. "Ivy," he said, his voice ragged. He took her hands in his. "I am not angry at you. I am angry that I didn't kill them all tonight. I am angry that I waited this long to find you." "Why?" Ivy asked, tears spilling over again. "Why do you care?" Silas looked up at her, his blue eyes searching her face. He seemed to be debating something. Finally he sighed. "Because," he said softly, "my wolf has been silent for 10 years, since the day I took over the pack. He hasn't spoken to me. He hasn't wanted a mate. He hasn't wanted anything." He brought her hand up to his chest, placing it over his heart. Ivy could feel the steady, powerful thrum of it. "But the moment you walked into that ballroom," Silas whispered, "he woke up. He didn't just wake up, Ivy. He roared." Ivy stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "But I'm an Omega. You're an Alpha. And I'm broken." "You aren't broken," he promised. "And tonight we sleep. Tomorrow we begin fixing what they broke." He stood up and went to a large dresser, pulling out a plain black t-shirt. "Here, the dress is ruined. Wear this." Ivy took the shirt. It was soft cotton. She went into the massive bathroom to change. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the bruises more clearly now under the harsh lights. She looked like a ghost. She put on the t-shirt. It swallowed her whole, coming down to her knees. It smelled like him, pine and rain. When she came out, Silas was lying on top of the covers on the left side of the bed. He was still in his dress pants and undershirt. He patted the space beside him. "Sleep," he commanded. Ivy hesitated, then climbed onto the massive bed, staying on the far edge, ready to bolt. The mattress was like a cloud. Her body, exhausted beyond measure, began to shut down instantly. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to Silas's breathing, deep and even out. She thought she wouldn't sleep. She thought the fear would keep her awake. But the scent of him was overwhelming. It triggered something primal in her brain. Something that said, safe, protector, mate. Her eyes drifted shut. Hours later, the scream tore through the silence of the estate. Silas was awake instantly. Beside him, Ivy was thrashing, tangled in the sheets. She was screaming, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. "No, no, please! The trap! It hurts!" she shrieked, still caught in the nightmare. Silas grabbed her shoulders to wake her. "Ivy! Ivy! Wake up! You're safe!" She didn't wake up. She lashed out, her hand striking him across the chest. It wasn't a weak slap. It was a solid blow that actually knocked the wind out of him. Silas froze. That was supernatural strength. "Ivy!" he roared, using his alpha voice to command her mind. Ivy gasped, her eyes flying open. She sat bolt upright, chest heaving, sweat soaking the t-shirt. She looked around wildly, not recognizing the room, her panic spiking. "Look at me," Silas said, grabbing her face gently to ground her. Ivy looked at him. Silas stopped breathing. Ivy's eyes weren't the muddy hazel they had been in the ballroom. They weren't the soft gold of a submissive wolf. Her eyes were glowing a vibrant, piercing violet. It was a color that hadn't been seen in the werewolf world for a century. It was the color of the moon goddess's chosen. "Ivy," Silas whispered, staring into the violet depths of her eyes, as the glow slowly faded back to hazel. "What are you?" Ivy blinked, the adrenaline fading, leaving her trembling. I had a nightmare. I dreamt of a white wolf, a giant white wolf trapped in a cage of thorns." Silas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. He looked over her head at the moon outside the window. The legends were true. The white wolf hadn't died out. She had just been hiding in the most unlikely place imaginable. And now, Silas realized with a cold dread, the Blackwood Pack wasn't the only enemy they had to worry about. If the High Council found out a violet-eyed wolf existed, they would come for her, and they wouldn't ask nicely. He tightened his grip. "Go back to sleep, Ivy. I've got you." But he knew, as he watched the shadows lengthen in the room, that the war had only just begun. The morning sun hit the glass walls of the master suite, but the light brought no warmth to the conversation happening in the downstairs study. Silas stood behind his massive oak desk, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, despite it being 9 in the morning. Across from him sat Gideon, his beta and oldest friend. Gideon was leaner than Silas, with wire-rimmed glasses and a tablet that contained the logistics of the entire pack. He was the brain to Silas's brawn, but right now Gideon looked pale. "Violet," Gideon repeated, his voice hushed. "You are certain? It wasn't a trick of the light? Maybe a reflection of a lamp?" "I know what I saw, Gideon," Silas said, staring into the amber liquid in his glass. It was violet, the color of amethyst. And when she screamed, she didn't just wake me up. She pushed me, physically. But she didn't touch me. Gideon dropped his tablet on the desk. "A telekinetic burst? Alpha, that's impossible. That's fairy tale nonsense. Wolves rely on muscle and tooth, not magic. The legends of the lunar matriarchs say otherwise, Silas murmured. He turned to the bookshelf behind him, pulling out a leather-bound tome that looked centuries old. He flipped the pages carefully until he found a faded illustration. It showed a woman standing atop a cliff, surrounded by massive wolves bowing their heads. Her eyes were painted a vivid, striking purple. The matriarchs, Gideon read over his shoulder. The queens of the old world. They didn't lead by strength, they led by command. They could force an alpha to submit with a single look. I thought they were hunted to extinction during the Great War 300 years ago. So did I, Silas said grimly. But Ivy has the eyes, and she has the strength buried deep under years of malnutrition and poison. If the council finds out, Gideon trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the air. The High Council was composed of the oldest, most conservative alphas. They feared anything they couldn't control. A wolf who could command alphas. They would view her as a nuclear threat. They won't find out, Silas snapped, slamming the book shut. She stays on the estate. No visitors. Increase the perimeter patrols. If a squirrel crosses the border, I want to know about it. And the girl? Gideon asked. Does she know? She thinks she's a broken omega, Silas said, his voice softening. She has no idea she's royalty. Upstairs, Ivy was awake. She felt different. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waking up in pain. The constant ache in her joints was gone, replaced by a strange, buzzing energy under her skin. And she was hungry. Not just peckish. She felt like she could eat an entire cow. Mrs. Higgins knocked and entered with a tray. Good morning, dear. The Alpha requested you eat a hearty breakfast. The tray was laden with eggs, bacon, toast, fruit, and steak. Ivy would usually struggle to finish a slice of bread. Today, she inhaled the food. She ate with a ferocity that embarrassed her, but her body demanded it. When she finished, she found a set of clothes laid out for her. Soft leggings, a thick wool sweater, and boots. They were new. Everything here was new. She wandered out of the room, feeling the house humming around her. She found her way to the library, drawn by a scent she recognized. Silas. He was standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered forest. When she entered, he turned immediately. The intensity of his gaze made her pause. Did you sleep? He asked. Better than I ever have, she admitted. Silas, last night, the nightmare. I felt strange. Silas walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel his body heat. Ivy, we need to talk about your family, the Fosters. Are you sure they were your biological parents? Ivy frowned. Yes, I think so. They died when I was 6. I don't remember much before that. Just singing. My mother used to sing to me. Do you have anything of theirs? A locket, she said, her hand going to her neck, but finding nothing. Jessica took it. She said it was too nice for a servant. Silas's jaw tightened. We will get it back. But Ivy, I need you to trust me. There are changes happening in your body. The food, the energy, the heat. Your wolf is waking up. And she is not an omega. Ivy laughed nervously. Silas, don't joke. I've been tested. I have 0 latent power. Tests can be faked, he said. And power can be hidden. Today we start training. Not to serve, but to fight. Fight? Ivy took a step back. I can't fight. I break. Not anymore, Silas said. Today we see what you are really made of. 2 weeks passed. The transformation in Ivy was nothing short of miraculous. With proper food, rest, and the absence of wolfsbane, her body had filled out. Her skin lost its grey pallor, glowing with health. Her hair, once brittle and dull, now shone like spun mahogany. But the biggest change was in her eyes. They were sharper. She could see a hawk in a tree a mile away. She could hear the heartbeats of the staff. Silas was relentless. Every morning, he took her to the private gym in the basement. He taught her how to throw a punch, how to use an attacker's weight against them. At first, Ivy was terrified of hurting him, but she quickly learned that Silas was like a mountain, immovable. "Hit me," Silas barked, holding up the sparring pads. "Stop apologizing and hit me, Ivy. Pretend I'm Colton. Pretend I'm Jessica." The mention of Jessica sparked a flare of heat in Ivy's chest. She visualized the smirk, the cruelty. She swung. Her fist connected with the pad with a resounding crack. Silas stumbled back a step, his eyes widening. He looked at the pad. The leather had split. "Good," he breathed, a proud smirk tugging at his lips. Again. But the peace of the Obsidian estate was fragile. One afternoon, Silas was called away to the border. A skirmish with some rogues. He left Ivy in the garden, under the watchful eye of 2 warriors. The garden was enclosed by high stone walls, safe and secluded. Ivy was kneeling in the snow, looking at a winter rose that had bloomed early. She felt peaceful. Then, the wind shifted. The scent hit her before the sound did. It smelled like rot and wet dog. One of the guards by the gate gurgled and collapsed. Ivy spun around. Standing there, wiping a bloody knife on his jeans, was a man she recognized. It wasn't a rogue. It was Marcus, the Blackwood Pack's executioner. He was a sadist who enjoyed pain more than combat. "Hello, little runt," Marcus grinned, his teeth yellow and jagged. "Did you think you could just run away? Colton wants his property back." The second guard charged. Marcus moved with unnatural speed, sidestepping and sinking the knife into the guard's ribs. The guard fell. Ivy was alone. "Don't worry," Marcus said, stepping over the rose bush, crushing the flower. "I'm not going to kill you. Colton was very specific. He wants you alive. He wants to break you himself. But he didn't say I couldn't have a little fun first. Maybe cut off a few fingers. Or that pretty nose." Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Ivy's veins. But beneath the panic, something else was rising. A roar, a pressure in her skull so intense she thought her head would explode. "Run!" her mind screamed. "Kill!" her blood answered. Marcus lunged. Ivy scrambled back, tripping over a root. Marcus landed on top of her, his heavy hand pinning her throat to the frozen ground. "Gotcha," he hissed, saliva dripping onto her face. He raised the knife. Ivy stared at the blade. She saw her reflection in the steel. Her eyes were glowing violet. No! The scream didn't come from her throat. It ripped out of her soul. A shockwave of energy blasted outward from her body. Marcus was thrown backward, as if he'd been hit by a truck. He slammed into the stone wall, bones crunching on impact. Ivy arched her back, agony tearing through her. It felt like her bones were liquefying and reforming. It was the pain of the shift, the pain she had waited 4 years for. "Oh!" she screamed, her voice deepening into a growl. Her clothes shredded, her hands clawed at the earth, fingers elongating, nails turning into razor-sharp black talons. Fur burst from her skin, not the brown or grey fur of a common wolf. White, pure, blinding white, like fresh snow. Marcus groaned, trying to stand up, clutching his chest. What the hell?" He looked up and froze. Standing where the girl had been was a wolf. But it wasn't just a wolf. It was massive. It stood nearly as tall as a horse at the shoulder, dwarfing any alpha Marcus had ever seen. Its fur was a pristine white, radiating a faint, ethereal glow, and its eyes were burning violet. The white wolf snarled, a sound that shook the remaining leaves off the trees. Marcus, a hardened killer, wet himself. Monster, he whimpered. The White Wolf didn't hesitate. She didn't possess Ivy's fear. She possessed the rage of 1,000 ancestors. She lunged, covering the distance in a blur of white light. Her jaws clamped around Marcus's shoulder. He screamed as she tossed him, a 200-pound man, across the garden like a rag doll. He hit the fountain, shattering the stone. The wolf prowled toward him, ready to finish it. "Ivy! Down!" The command came from the gate. Silas stood there, chest heaving. He had sensed her distress through the bond he hadn't fully accepted yet. He saw the carnage. He saw the dead guard. He saw the broken executioner. And he saw her. Silas stopped dead. He dropped to his knees, not in submission, but in awe. The White Wolf turned her massive head toward him. She growled low in her throat, her violet eyes wild and unrecognized. She was lost in the instinct, in the first bloodlust of the shift. "It's me," Silas said softly, holding his hands out, palms up. "It's Silas. You're safe, Ivy. You did it. You shifted." The wolf huffed. She took a step toward him, sniffing the air. The scent of pine and rain reached her nose. It cut through the red haze of rage. "Mate." The word echoed in the wolf's mind. She whined, her body trembling. The massive beast lowered her head, nuzzling into Silas's outstretched hands. Silas buried his face in her thick white fur. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you, my queen." But as he held her, Silas looked over at the broken body of Marcus. The Blackwood pack had sent an assassin into his home. They had tried to take her. And now they knew she was special. Marcus was alive. If he got back to Colton, the secret of the White Wolf would be out. Silas's eyes hardened. He looked at Gideon, who had just run up behind him, staring at the White Wolf in terror. "Gideon," Silas said, his voice cold as ice. "Take Marcus to the cells. Keep him alive. I want to know everything Colton is planning." "And the girl?" Gideon whispered, unable to look away from the violet eyes of the beast. "She isn't a girl anymore," Silas said, standing up and stroking the wolf's massive flank. "Prepare the jet. We aren't waiting for the war to come to us. We're going to the High Council. We need to claim her status before Colton does." Ivy, sensing Silas's anxiety, let out a howl that pierced the sky. It was a challenge to the world. The broken Omega was gone. The White Wolf had arrived. Here is the final part of the story, followed by the conclusion and call to action, CTA, for your video. The private jet touched down on the tarmac of the neutral zone, a city built specifically for the High Council meetings. It was a place of marble, steel, and ancient laws where violence was strictly forbidden, punishable by immediate execution. Ivy stared out the window, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She was human again, wearing a tailored navy suit Silas had ordered for her during the flight. She looked less like a broken servant and more like a CEO. But inside, she was terrified. "They will try to intimidate you," Silas said, unbuckling his seatbelt. He turned to her, his expression serious. "The council is made up of 5 of the oldest alphas in the world. They believe in blood purity and hierarchy above all else. To them, an Omega rising to power is an abomination." "And what if they order you to give me back?" Ivy asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Colton has the paperwork. By law, I am Blackwood property." Silas reached over, taking her hand. His grip was grounding. "Then I burn the law to the ground. You are my mate, Ivy. No piece of paper overrides the bond." They exited the plane. A convoy of black SUVs was waiting. The drive to the council chamber was silent. The building itself was a Colosseum-style structure, ancient and imposing. As they walked up the massive stone steps, paparazzi and news crews from the shifter world were already swarming. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. "Alpha Sterling, is it true you stole a member of the Blackwood Pack? Who is the girl? Is it war?" Silas ignored them, shielding Ivy with his body as they entered the heavy bronze doors. Inside, the council chamber was a vast, circular room. In the center was a sunken pit for the accused. Raised high above on a dais sat the 5 elders. They looked ancient, their eyes bored and dangerous. But they weren't alone. Standing in the pit, looking smug in a fresh suit, was Colton. Beside him stood a lawyer holding a briefcase. "Ah, the thief arrives!" An elder named Magnus boomed. He was a massive man with a white beard and scars covering his face. "Alpha Sterling, you stand accused of kidnapping, theft of property, and violation of territorial sovereignty. How do you plead?" Silas walked into the pit, pulling Ivy with him. He stood tall, radiating power that made the air shimmer. "I plead justice, Elder Magnus. I did not steal property. I rescued a victim." Colton stepped forward, feigning outrage. "Victim? She is an Omega born in my pack. Her parents were indebted to my family. She worked to pay off their debt. She is a servant, nothing more. And Alpha Sterling broke into my home and took her because he didn't want to pay his own debts." The lawyer opened the briefcase and produced a stack of documents. "We have her birth certificate, her employment contract, and the debt ledger. She belongs to Blackwood." Magnus looked down at Silas. "The law is clear, Sterling. Unless you have proof of abuse so severe it warrants intervention, the Omega must be returned, and you will be fined half your territory." "I have proof," Silas said calmly, "but not on paper." He turned to Ivy. "Show them." Ivy stepped forward. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a sledgehammer. She looked at Colton, who was sneering at her. "Go on, Ivy," Colton mocked. "Tell them how mistreated you were. Tell them how we fed you and clothed you. Tell them you're just a useless, broken girl who seduced a rich alpha." The anger sparked. It started in her toes and shot up like wildfire. It wasn't the blind rage of the wolf this time. It was the cold, hard fury of a woman who had survived hell. "I am not broken," Ivy said, her voice shaking at first, then steadying. "And I am not yours." "Silence, girl," Elder Magnus shouted. "You speak when spoken to." Ivy looked up at the dais. She locked eyes with Magnus. "I said," Ivy spoke, and her voice changed. It wasn't just her voice anymore. It was a dual tone, human and wolf overlaid, creating a harmonic resonance that vibrated the very stones of the building. "I am not yours." The entire room froze. The elders sat up straight. The murmuring crowd went silent. "That voice," one of the female elders whispered. "That is the command." Colton laughed nervously. "A ventriloquist trick. She's a freak." He lunged forward to grab her arm. "Come here, you little—" Ivy didn't flinch. She didn't shift. She simply turned her head and looked at him. Her eyes flashed. The violet light was so bright it illuminated the dim chamber. "Kneel." The word hit Colton like a physical weight. It crushed his will instantly. His knees buckled. He slammed onto the stone floor, gasping, unable to move, unable to look away. His wolf whined in submission, terrified by the predator standing before him. The elders were on their feet. "Violet eyes," Magnus gasped. "The matriarch line, the sovereign blood." Ivy stood over Colton, her eyes glowing, her power filling the room until it was hard to breathe. She looked up at the council. "You speak of laws," Ivy said, her voice ringing with ancient authority. "The first law states that a sovereign wolf answers to no pack. The sovereign wolf is the law." She pointed at Colton. "This man poisoned me with wolfsbane for 10 years to keep me weak. He enslaved me. He tortured me. And he sent an assassin to my mate's home to kill me." Mate? Magnus looked at Silas. Silas stepped up beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. My mate. And if anyone tries to take her, they declare war on Obsidian, and they declare war on the Sovereign. The politics in the room shifted instantly. The elders weren't stupid. A violet-eyed wolf hadn't been seen in centuries. She was a living god to their people. If they opposed her, their own packs would revolt to follow her. Magnus banged his gavel. The claim of property by Blackwood is null and void. Ivy Foster is recognized as a free sovereign. Colton struggled against the invisible weight holding him down. No! This is a trick. She's a witch. You can't do this. I can, Ivy said softly. She leaned down, whispering in Colton's ear. I could kill you right now, Colton. I could command your heart to stop beating. But that would be too easy. She released the pressure. Colton collapsed, gasping for air, sweat pooling around him. Go home, Ivy commanded. Tell Jessica. Tell everyone. The broken Omega is coming for everything you have. I will take your alliances. I will take your reputation. And when you have nothing left, then I will come for you. Colton scrambled backward, looking at her with pure terror. He didn't say a word. He turned and ran out of the chamber, his lawyer trailing behind him. The chamber erupted into chaos. Journalists were shouting. The elders were arguing. Silas turned Ivy to face him. He cupped her face. You did it. We did it, she whispered, the violet fading from her eyes, leaving her exhausted. She leaned into him. Is it over? Silas looked over her shoulder. At the very top of the stands, in the shadows where the light didn't reach, a figure was watching them. It was a man in a grey suit, clapping slowly. He didn't look afraid like the others. He looked hungry. No, Silas said, his eyes narrowing. Colton was just the beginning, Ivy. You just revealed yourself to the world. The monsters who have been hiding in the dark, they're going to come for you now. Ivy followed his gaze. The man in the grey suit smiled, tipped his head, and vanished into the shadows. A shiver ran down her spine, but then she felt the warmth of Silas's hand on her back and the hum of the white wolf in her blood. Let them come, Ivy said, gripping Silas's hand. I'm not the prey anymore. Ivy has won her freedom and humiliated her abusers, but her display of power has awakened enemies far older and more dangerous than Colton. Who was the man in the grey suit watching from the shadows? And what is the true history of the violet-eyed wolves that the Council is terrified of? The war for the werewolf world has just begun, and Ivy is at the center of it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see Ivy and Silas take on the mysterious new villain in Part 8, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops. Comment Team White Wolf below if you think Ivy should take over the Council. Thanks for watching.